Hello and welcome to the AstroPub, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Berserker01, Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender at the AstroPub, your space bar at the end of the universe. And this is the Captain's Table. This is where I bring people from all over the Star Citizen community to talk about Star Citizen. Nazeris, did I get your name right? I feel like I misspelled your name. Okay, good.
Nazer, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we did it.
Yeah. And now to remind me next time Darj is on to intentionally misspell his name.
Got it.
Because it's a joke now. Anywho, with this, I brought on 3 veterans of Captain's Table, as well as 3 veterans of the Star Citizen community. Between the 4 of us, there is many, many years of pointless, stupid information that nobody actually needs to remember, not even CIG themselves, but we do, because that's just what we do.
It's a problem.
It is a problem. I call it my brain disease, and I think it's the best way of putting it. So we're going to share our brain disease with you, so that you all can also have this information, and hopefully it sticks in your brain for a very long time and never leaves it.
What do you mean Kruger's not a spaceship manufacturer and they bought out space to make the Constellation a snub fighter?
So much.
And Tree's gone.
So much.
I touched something I shouldn't have touched. Sorry.
Anywho, with that all being said, let's introduce the folks here. I want to start with you, Naz. Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen, and where can they find you?
So I am Nazeris. I run the No Forge. There we go. I remember the name. Both the YouTube channel and the Star Citizen org. Most of my content right now is playing the game, but every other Tuesday, hopefully, is Pathfinder's podcast, which I started with Tree. So while Tree's being busy, I'm going to try and run it solo and hopefully eventually have enough time to actually set up some other guests that can come with their own topics. I also run, like I said, the No Forge organization, or No Forge Industries, and we do economy stuff, and we do at least one event every Monday, with many more probably throughout the week. So yeah, No Forge, the No Forge on YouTube and Twitch, and then No Forge Industries on Star Citizen Organizations.
Awesome. And what was it you say? What is the Pathfinders podcast? Because the way I've always described it is like if you liked the Captain's Table, but you thought it was too short, you should.
Instead of like having nice, simple topics and things that you're like, what's this question? Talk on it for 2 minutes and then move on. It's like, what's this question? Spend 5 hours.
Yeah. One topic. Like I know there was one on server meshing, which is one of the reasons why I asked Tree and you to come on. Like y'all did one on server meshing before CIG had even like showed off server meshing. Yeah. And I think it was legitimately like 5 hours.
Yeah, the one thing where I really like that we do on Pathfinders is we don't just give you. We basically do what this last IC was: is the history, the now, the plan.
Mm-hmm.
It is the whole thing. So I think it's really good. One of the best episodes we did was still like one of the first ones where Tree made this giant spreadsheet of inconsistencies with the star system sizes, and he just poured through all of them, and we talked through where they are at, why they might change, and that's the kind of crap we do. We make spreadsheets and talk through things.
This is what I mean by like
citations.
And citations. Always cite your sources.
Yes, yeah. And it's one of those things.
Up or shut up.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I mean by brain disease. Like Tree is the only reason why I know that the star map has actually been updated. Because Tree has gone back and looked at the stats and then tracked the stats and been like, they've secretly been editing the star map and not telling anybody that they've edited the star map to update information, but they haven't done it consistently. So
it is a brain disease because before we got started with all this, I had hair like Nazeris.
I actually realized I accidentally did hair and bald squad like right now.
Make sure to get it cut just today for this show.
Yeah.
I'm loving the shine you got.
Oh yeah, dude, it's good. Great, it's nice. Yeah, it's a nice.
The Regiment Honey's got you on is phenomenal.
Yeah. The skin, dude, smooth skin.
This is just for all of you who are also in your 30s or older, like a lot of us here on the Captain's Table. Do not ever think that skincare is stupid. Skincare will make it so that you're not feeling at all You'll feel so much better in your 30s and 40s if you take care of your skin in your 20s and teens. And it's not even something fancy, just like, lotion. Just take care of it,
A little bit of niacinamide too.
Yeah.
Goes a long way.
And if you got a beard,
basic,
put some
just
oil in
washing
it, make it smell.
properly your skin. Like it's
Water?
Water? That people drown in water, Nazeris. Water rusts.
I know the statistics. 100% of people who drink water die. I know.
Deadly in certain concentration.
Have you guys ever seen anyone talk about the signs that like no swimming, like sinking water or something?
I haven't, but we're already getting off track.
Oh.
Tree.
Oh, those are terrifying.
Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen, and where can they find you?
Hi, I'm Tree0311. Nazeris and I do the Pathfinders podcast, and like you said, it's we really just follow the development of Star Citizen Squadron 42 in detail, and so we really enjoy doing the deep dives. We've done deep dives on server meshing, on quantum, on things like engineering and other gameplay mechanics and things like that. But then we also regularly follow the monthly reports and the updates to the roadmap, and eventually we'll be covering the progress tracker once it gets updated again. But in the meantime, we enjoy following the development. It's a hobby. It's hosted on my channel over on Twitch and then uploaded to YouTube. Everything is Tree0311. And just so everybody knows, I keep no monetization for myself. Everything gets donated in its entirety to stackup.org. It's a veterans charity. So if you're interested in that, check it out. Haven't done a Armchair Admirals and Generals podcast in a long time, just because I've been stupid busy. Hopefully I don't look too haggard right now, because I've got 5.5-week-old twins on top of the 2.5-year-old toddler. So
I was gonna say, like, how are the twins doing? I'm sure they're doing healthy, but I'm sure that it's a chore to deal with too.
Yep. Yeah, it's
still less work than the progress tracker, though.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Jake is probably 30 going on 50 because of all that right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, everybody's good. Everybody's healthy. I'm still on paternity leave for another like 10 days, but I don't know how I'm going to go back to work. Yeah, it's good though. It could definitely be worse. They're already sleeping 3-hour stretches, so we're good here in the House of Tree, and hopefully we're pretty much settling into a routine. So I think we'll be able to resume.
It's good.
I'll be able to join Naz on the podcast again soon.
I'm gonna say I do like the new office. I'm glad that you have an office, and it looks snazzy and everything. So.
Oh, I wish I could get more of it in camera, because I put a lot of work into this over the last several months, and cheers, props to Victura for the painting up behind me. But I've got my Star Citizen stuff here. I've got all my other model ships over there from different IPs, so it's sufficiently nerdy. I've got my Lego over on that wall, and my leather-bound books, smelling rich mahogany. Yeah.
Nice. And speaking of new houses, SpaceTomato, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? And how is your new house?
Yes, thank you. First, congrats to you, Tree. I don't think we've talked since the kids came along, and that's awesome, dude. I imagine you got your hands full.
I've hardly talked to anyone but my wife, so
yeah. and the babies going back and forth. No, but good to be on another show with you and Naz. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah,
good to be on a show with you and Naz. Thanks for having me on, Pub. I make Star Citizen videos as well. The few channels for that. Mainly, I'm on YouTube, but I also stream on Twitch. But the main channel, SpaceTomato, is it's Tomato Talks, which are like a lot of kind of context and development news and big updates. And then I've started doing a feature watch series recently, which is kind of just like picking and choosing something that I like from the recent week and talking a little more about the history of it. Second channel, SpaceTomato 2, is more long form content. Like I got a couple podcasts that are kind of like this, Launch Sequence and Citizen Central, and then I've got a gameplay channel, and me and Mrs. Tomato actually started a channel called The Tomatoes, which is kind of more real life oriented and kind of the stuff that's going on as we transition back and forth between her home country of Turkey and mine of America. And we just released a video, like you mentioned there, moving into this new house, which was an episode of our life. It was, Jesus, moving is not
It
simple.
sucks. It sucks.
Yeah,
Moving
it
into a new
was-
house sucks. I had when I moved into this house, my wife and I both collectively said we literally cannot move anymore. I need to. This is not. This is not. Can't. I am. This is the last move I am doing until I am an ancient person with kids who can help me with moving because this is awful.
Yeah,
I have a
we
a
had to
weird
move into
question
this
for everyone.
house
Yeah.
because of the kids, and I
What-
keep
what-
telling my wife, "I'll move. I'll die in this house." I'm never moving again.
What is the longest anyone has been in a single house?
Well, I lived
Outside
in.
of childhood.
Oh, okay. Well, that's different.
Like throughout your entire life?
Other than childhood, because it's even childhood
Well,
I
5
mean,
years.
I lived with my parents in a house
for like 18 years.
15 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
but no. Besides that,
not even
not very much.
16.
Over here in Turkey, our first house ended up underwater. Our
Literally.
second house got hit by like a hurricane kind of place that was falling apart, and then we kind of rushed into this place. But we plan on keeping this place for a long time. This is land that her dad has had for like 40 something years, and it's out here perched on like the side of a cliff. We got a nice view of the sea, and it's good. It's just there's
Maybe don't jinx yourself if you're going to talk about it being on the side of a
yeah,
cliff.
dude.
And
Yeah,
you wanting to be
Knock.
living in there for a long time.
we've all read the series of unfortunate events, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I
House on the
will-
side of the cliff.
I will not even think about it.
All I can say is it's impressive because I know Tomato, you've had to move back and forth from the U.S. to Turkey like I don't know how many times since I've known you. It's been at least twice a year or something like that.
Yeah,
And not
yeah,
just
it's
the
generally
not
twice
just
a
the
year.
U.S., the West Coast. You
Yeah.
go to the wrong side.
It's like the opposite part of the world. Like we
literally
live on the globe,
like just on the literally the other side, 12-hour difference sort of thing.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
You're on the opposite side of the flat Earth. Yeah.
it's a lot, but we're very grateful to be moved in here, and Mrs. Tomato has like constructed a beautiful studio which I've never gotten to fully have built out, and we're just happy to be in a place stable.
Nice. All right. Now that we've had a nice little kind of personal introductions and everything like that, I just realized that because Tree just moved into a new house and you just moved into a new house, so me and Naz have been in the same place for a while. I guess now this is my
We've been here
fifth
for
year.
6 years.
Yeah, this is my 5th year here in my my new house. But but with that
Is
all
that
being said,
In Pyro?
yeah, in Pyro,
Nice.
been 6 years.
Rough neighborhood.
Yeah, good. I've
You
got
don't screw with
good
people,
neighbors.
They leave you alone.
Yeah, they got good neighbors. Just ignore Frank. He's got the skull on his shoulder. Don't ask about the skull. He gets really upset about you if you ask about his skull shoulder. But other than that, he's great.
His HOA is absolutely wild.
Yeah.
He comes around asking for taxes every week, but there are no taxes in Pyro, so it's weird, but you just keep going with it.
Yeah, but he makes a mean noodle. His noodles are great. His bakery has movable things that move when they're baked, but don't ask too many questions about the things that move. They taste great. They're great. Just don't think about
yeast. It's
Yeah.
just yeast. Don't worry about it.
it. Just very, very active yeast. And then every Friday you go out to the solar flare where the fire rats do their ritual celebration of the sun by sacrificing a goat, and then they barbecue it afterwards. You just have to make sure you wear enough SPF 1000 and you're fine.
Love a block party.
Space Goats win CIG.
All right. With that all being said, let's start talking about server meshing. And because SpaceTomato was the last one to introduce themselves, I'm going to ask you the very basic question, in the sense that because server meshing, we can say server meshing, but what is server meshing in like the basic sense to like if somebody doesn't know what it actually is, what is server meshing when it comes to Star Citizen?
You said it was easy.
This is the basic. This is the
I mean,
basic.
okay, it's server meshing's basically just simultaneously loading a new server without a loading screen. Like it's transitioning to another server without having to go through any sort of process other than moving.
So just like seamless transitions between two different servers.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Tree, what's a shard?
Oh man,
I
now I
get-
got to do the real answer, not
Yes.
the dad joke.
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, yeah. That one's easier. That one's harder.
My son had a shard just an hour ago.
All right, no, that's sherd. I'm thinking of sherd with the pottery.
A shard would be the collection of all the things that CIG needs to run a single instance of the entire game universe. So the servers, the background services, and everything in between, along with the connected clients. That would be a shard.
Okay. So when we're talking about, and I'll ask you, Naz, this one. When we're talking about server meshing, being able to transition seamlessly from one server to another, and a shard, which is all of those servers and backend client stuff together to make the game run. How is this important when it comes to Star Citizen as a game? Like, why does this matter? Why should people care about server meshing as it exists? Because like server meshing isn't gameplay, right? It's just back-end stuff. So why does this matter?
Well, for one, it's tantamount to the experience, and it's more of a modern shift in the entire industry. And I'm going to be a little more ambiguous about this one, because like Minecraft, I think really kicked it off. Millions, like 30 million blocks in any direction. Go, no load screens. Doesn't matter how many blocks you place. Doesn't matter what's going on in the world. No load screens. No Man's Sky is the same way. There are hidden load screens, and you can really find the transitions, but it's not there. And this is a shift away from very arcadey games, something like Skyrim, where it's walk 3 feet load screen, walk 3 feet load screen, and it's a quality of life thing. It's a technology that is not used a lot in a lot of places. MMOs have done it before, but a lot of them also do have that fade to black, then fade back out as you transition to different regions. Some have done a little bit more hidden load screens. A lot of newer Sony titles also do hidden load screens where your character will like shimmy through a cave, and it gets real. The field of view will get real tight. It's that kind of a system. It's more of a modern way of doing games, just on a scale that no one's tried before. Especially with these, you can be anywhere in space and find a transition point and go across it, and it enables not just seamless game space, but thousands of players to be in the same area, fighting a giant space battle, or thousands of NPCs and players in a single landing zone without billions of kilometers away, the server having to keep track of it. So it makes the game space not only be able to be wider with being able to see across borders, but also be able to be denser.
Okay. And I do want to emphasize this as well, because this is one of the things that I think a lot of people will point out, because this is something we hear a lot, which is server meshing is not new technology. Server meshing has been around for a very long time. And even there are elements of server meshing that Star Citizen does, which have been done with other games. But I want to emphasize this because it's one of those things a lot of people don't realize. No game works the same way.
Yeah.
Every game has to build out a brand new solution to their net programming when it comes to server and stuff like that.
It's the same kind of thing that like server meshing has existed, like somebody said, from Ultima Online 1998. The same way rasterization has existed since, I believe, the first wireframe game was an Elite title.
Yeah.
Where they had wireframe ships.
I don't know if that was the first wireframe game, but it was definitely one of the first space games that was wireframe. That used that sort of thing.
It was definitely in the first kind of batch of them. But every game has to build their own models. You can't just take Final Fantasy assets and say, well, I'm building a space game. They're not going to work because they're just different assets.
Mm-hmm.
Same way every server technology for an MMO needs to be built from the ground up for that game, for that experience they want. Like, that's why most companies build their own engines, because they have requirements that aren't on the general market.
Yeah.
Because you can't make an engine for everyone, much like you can't make a game for everyone.
Yeah. And there's also different like requirements, like stuff that works for Elder Scrolls Online, for instance, wouldn't work for Eve, because the way that assets are loaded and the way that priority, who has priority and how things move are completely different. And as much as we wish there was standardization in a lot of things like games to make it easier for you to be like, oh, I can figure out exactly what's happening, there is very little standardization in gaming space. Like, what is an alpha to one company is not an alpha to another company. So like even the naming isn't the same, and how they organize their teams isn't the same. There are some similar stuff with things like agile and
like, even down to like positions, it's not the same.
So, but it's just super different. So it's hard to like use everybody else. So it's not really helpful to go like, oh, well, X game has this, why don't you have that? It's because X game built that from the ground up, rather than like taking an off the shelf asset and plugging it in, because it wouldn't necessarily work for every games. So
I like a friend of mine, credit to Panic Switch, said at one point that server meshing felt kind of like the just next generation of loading screens, in the sense that it's not like you're saying, it's not a standard. It's not the same exact thing in every single way. It's something that people will figure out how to utilize for how they need to load their game seamlessly in the future.
Yeah, because
now just go back and watch the trailers and the publicity for the PS4. It's what they said we were going to get with the PS4.
Well, it's what they did with Massive Action Game, MAG. I think MAG was
holy crap, that's a throwback.
Yeah. Y'all
wow,
remember
I haven't
that?
heard that in a long time.
I just remember
Yellow
the name
Dart
of it.
Bubs on YouTube.
What's that?
I would love to know. Yellow Dart Bubs on YouTube is comment. Do you guys believe they'll get it working? This is the third attempt since 2019 trying to make server meshing working. They failed
Put that
twice
in the
and
questions Q&A thing.
What?
Well, go ahead and illustrate it, because that is a good question. Because there has been even before we went live, there were people who were saying that like their CIG was secretly the reason why they're implementing the system for jump points, where you have to queue up with the ATC, was secretly because CIG fails at server meshing, and so they have to find a way to queue up people to join a server, and this is all just a secret behind the scenes way of CIG implementing server meshing while having this problem. So it's clear that there is a lot of misinformation about how server meshing even functions. So why?
I just want to know when they've failed twice and how this is the third attempt. iCache didn't cut the mustard, but they didn't make it to the server meshing part with iCache. iCache was replaced with PES, and PES is what has allowed them to build onto server meshing. But there's no third attempt at server meshing or second attempt or anything like that. It's an iterative process to build up to it to get to server meshing. This is static server meshing, then they'll go to dynamic. But there's no such thing as this being the third attempt, and they failed multiple times.
They're probably beating their head against the problem, and you could technically call different things failures, but it's just problem solving to get it to work, right?
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
that's development.
You have a background in engineering. I know, SpaceTomato. So like like how many, like a lot of, especially when engineering. I come from a family of engineers, so I know this whole like. The whole, you fail more times than you succeed when you do anything, because you have to learn how something works. And if you don't know how it works, like you often, if you're doing something brand new that no one's done before, you're going to fail a lot because no one's done it before, and you have to figure out what doesn't work.
Yeah.
Trust
I
you.
think
research and development is hard.
Yeah, I think a really good resource for seeing where everything is and what they've been doing for it is the unofficial roadmap to server meshing by Adamtanium. Like he's got all the receipts and all the links to all the ISCs and SCLs and ATVs
Beautiful.
and posts and citizen cons where they've talked about it.
Mhm.
And he goes all the way back to when they started talking about the wanting to do like even just iCache.
Yeah.
And he had all the way back. But I wonder if they're like picking up like iCache failing and when they talked about pre-CitizenCon where the database was failing and they needed to get it fixed, not that it did fail, but they needed to update it to make it work. But I people will find like when a topic blows up, a lot of this in Star Citizen, that some topic will blow up like iCache failed, and that will like resonate like for all of time. and then they'll just call that a failure without following up on the topic on what they did to fix it. They just assume that it failed, so we don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's just resonating.
So here's the question, and I'll start with this is just kind of a back from Naz, and I'll go back to the Tree and SpaceTomato. This is the basic statement: is server meshing going to work?
Yeah, like it. There isn't a chance it's not going to work because they'll work on it till it does work.
Okay, Tree.
I think the bigger challenge is, like, everybody's talking about it, because that's the big thing, is we have to really separate static server meshing, which is what's coming in 4.0, from dynamic server meshing. In dynamic server meshing is what really separates what CIG is doing from what other games and game developers have done, where instead of spinning up an entire, having a this is the limitation, the shard is this box, and the limitations of the shard and the technology that the shard uses, from all the different services and stuff, is this. And if we have too many players, we just spin up another shard. Whereas what Star Citizen and CIG are trying to do is they're trying to allow for dynamic server meshing to allow this box to scale up and stretch up and down it as needed, to make it so that way shards are more regionalized based off of latency. Your regional shards versus kind of like how ESO's version of persistence and replication. I talked to one of their engineers over there, and he was in our chat once, and he said that their version is essentially limited to, I think it was either 600 or 900 connected clients. And at that point, they have to spin up another one that has that hard limitation. Well, CIG doesn't want that. CIG wants their shard to be able to scale up as the number of people connecting to it scales up, and then scale back down. And eventually they will run into hard limits. But that's the part of the whole thing with server meshing for CIG is it isn't just making an additional replicant. It isn't, which is a single version of the replication layer. It isn't making just adding more servers. It is distributing all the microservices behind it, things that would normally be run on the game server, and allowing those to scale up as well. That's why they're part of the reason they're refactoring all these things is because right now it's just like with the replication layer, it was tied to the server. It was on the server, and so it couldn't scale when it was on the server. But by separating it, just like they're going, separating ATC, separating the mission service, all these different things to allow them to individually scale as a shard scales, that's where where they're able to remove a lot of those limitations. Not remove them entirely, because eventually you can only have, just like the original vision of server meshing, where you could only have so many connected clients before it just got, they talked about it in the server meshing video in 2021, how it just wasn't feasible to just have everybody connected to one DGS. But now, you'll have that, and I'm doing this, the Chris Roberts talk, I apologize, but they will eventually run into that issue with connections and being able to synchronize everything. But it gives them a lot more room to stretch and grow an individual shard that a lot of companies aren't trying to take on. Because it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of research and development. It costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of time, and it takes a whole lot of try this and that doesn't work, and try that doesn't work. But that's the way it is. Yeah. Okay.
I got that. So you went on a very, very good, nice, detailed diatribe.
Sorry.
So from the sounds of things, the answer is more complicated than yes, it will work and no, it won't work. It's more that we're going to have there's a limit upon which CIG is going to reach, and they haven't reached it yet, but they know that they're going to reach it at some point.
And that's part of what static testing for static is. And you've talked about this, Paul. They don't want to have to do static server meshing, but they need to do it in order to stress the system that they built to figure out where they need to put in those sort of, okay, here's that line that we need, we're approaching, 800 players on a server connected to the, a replication layer. At what point do we need to start scaling up things and adding in more servers, or spin up an additional replicant, and how do they work those connections? Because that's the thing a lot of people don't realize, is that it's not going to be a single replication layer or a single replicant for all of the shard. They will add more of them. The replicant is designed to scale just like the amount of servers is designed to scale.
Okay. This is where I put SpaceTomato on blast and make him answer hard questions, because last time I did this, I made him do a when question, and he said yes, it would come out this year, and he did actually. We did technically get server meshing in testing, because I do also want to emphasize before we continue on, CIG has tested server meshing twice already, successfully.
Was it only twice?
3 times actually, because they also did it with Evocati. So yeah, they did it Evocati, and during the Evocati, 4 times, because during that there was one just Evocati test where they tested two Stanton and Pyro being connected to one backend at the same time. And then they did another test where you could transition between Stanton and Pyro through the jump point. That was an Evocati test. And then they did 2 public tests where it was just Stanton. One where they split it up into, I think, like 6 or 8 different servers, the system.
There's multiple configurations.
And then they did one which with 3 configurations, 3 server configurations versus the 6 to 8 configurations. So that one was done.
10pound42 has done a really good job of tracking those configurations and the different tests that they've run. So if you haven't checked out his videos on that, do so.
Yeah. So when I say something like they've already tested server meshing and it works, it like the actual technology functions, because the actual technology isn't new. It's old technology, has been around for a while. It's just a big deal that it's working within CIG's parameters and how it's functioning. The question becomes more is like, can this technology continue forward with as it stands? So that's my question for you, SpaceTomato, is do you believe that this technology, server meshing, is going to be the thing that's going to push forward and continue to grow and like become the kind of foundation that Star Citizen seems to want it to, or CIG wants to have for CIG or for Star Citizen long term?
I definitely think that I'm in huge agreement with Tree that separating static from dynamic is the first step to that, because like I do think that static can be a good foundation for the game. If they were to just be able to split up, I don't know, every star system, and all star systems are different sizes and there's different populations and all that stuff, but like just by standard saying that every system is 5 servers, I have no doubt they can do that, and there's no knowing where the player count would go if they were to do that. But they want to do these dynamic islands, I think he called it in that letter from the chairman that one time. Basically have the ability for, theoretically, a big spaceship to be its own server, flying through another server in a system, and people transitioning between those servers into the spaceship, out of the spaceship. That's I don't even know. Like, I'm not a software engineer. I don't know how feasible that is in a game environment like this with all these different things being tracked. I mean, even just bringing up something like the Maelstrom system and how much data is involved there, and then thinking about all the other things of the entities that we need and the persistence that needs to happen with them, and looking at the way that the game works right now and how that persistence can degrade the game over time. There's just so many questions involved in, will server meshing allow the game to be what they want it to be? I think they've shown that they have the tenacity to continue to shoot for it, but I also would genuinely be worried of just how much effort that would take from the rest of the game's development, getting something like that to work. It's not the same people, of course, but it is the same pit of money, and it is the same development, pool of development. Your people, the people you're hiring, the places that you're focusing, they've got a lot of work ahead of them, I think, to make it work. But I genuinely, I don't know. When it comes to dynamic server meshing, I just don't know.
Okay.
That's a big ask.
All right. Yeah, because I was going to say that I think there's definitely a question in the air, because as far as we know, static meshing works. They've tested it. It works. There's some weird things that happen every so often. Like, for instance, when you're jumping into another server from through Quantum, it looks seamless. But when you try to leave that server and go to another server, so if you're in a server and you're leaving that server into another server, like transitioning towards a server, then it's seamless. But when you're jumping out, it's like say you're in a planetary orbit and you want to leave that planet, you spool up your Quantum and you hit the edge of the server, you drop out, and then you have to respool and jump again. So it's not fully seamless because it pulls you out of Quantum. You can fly across them seamlessly, but when you Quantum, it doesn't work properly.
And so I think it's another thing, like as far as expectation management goes, what they're going for with 4.0 is just like what they did with 3.18, where they were trying to get parity. We are introducing this new groundbreaking technology, and we want to have parity with what we had before with this new groundbreaking technology. We want it to be as close to the same experience as it was before, but having it allow us to continue to move forward. Because right now we're up against this wall.
Mhm.
And that's what their goal was with PES. They said it multiple times. If you don't notice a difference, then we've done our job. Obviously, that didn't work out right. But once they knocked the kinks out, then 3.19, 3.19, it really was okay. This works, and it's enabled a few other things. But otherwise, I'm playing the game like I was before. But except for this new technology and that's what they're going for. And the reason we don't have it yet is, the mesh servers part works, but we don't have the mission system refactor. We don't have the updated quantum travel system. All these things have to come together for us to be able to have the experience we have in game right now with server meshing in 4.0. And once those things come together, then we can get in there and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is the exact same as it had before. We might get a little bit more server performance, maybe not. Maybe it'll be, all over the place. We might get some higher player counts. But other than that, they just want everything to function as it did before, prior to server meshing. And then from there, it's just like we have now. We're past 3.18 several patches now, and it's a night and day different thing because we had that enabled. But that first patch of 4.0, we shouldn't feel a huge difference other than there's going to be some shit on fire.
Yeah. You also have pyro, so you'll be able to like go to a different system.
But in terms of like the
gameplay,
the experience, the experience for the individual player shouldn't be that different. But what will be a lot different is what we have in 4.1 and 4.2 when they start to work these kinks out and really start to push and test things and make their way forward. It probably won't allow for things like PES did. The PES was really a blocker in terms of gameplay development, but there will be certain changes that we notice in the subsequent patches that wouldn't have been possible without server meshing, and then the refactors that make it have allowed for compatibility. The mission, just thinking about the things like the mission refactor and updated quantum travel system, things that we've had issues with for ages and have been limited because they're like, well, we're not going to do it now because we're going to redo it later. I'm looking forward to being able to log off and then log back on and pick back up where I was with my mission.
Yeah.
That's what the mission refactor will allow for.
Yeah.
We always talk about how long it takes to get started. Well, we have persistence, but soon we're going to have mission persistence because it'll allow, that's what server meshing has the development for it has allowed for, and that we're narrowing that gap when you log out of the game and log back in the next time before, where you get back to playing and pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I was going to say that we actually had this conversation because CIG's removed a lot of ability for logging out from bed logs in 3.23, and one of the reasons why is because they want to do persistence. So when if you jumped out of your ship in like say you went to a Daymar and just went to a random place in Daymar and like logged off when you're Aurora, when you log back in, they want you to be able to just be right back in your Aurora where you last were, and with no need for a bed or anything like that. You're just there. And that's something they want to move towards post 4.0. So,
the debuff from not logging out in the bed is back pain. and a tier 3 back injury.
Oh gosh, no. Oh, it's the 30
I want my
experience.
realism, CIG.
Yes.
Get your
Shoot like
level
on the
3
floor or the ground where you're at.
Yeah.
You
I know-
got tier 3 back injury.
For anybody who doesn't know, try falling asleep on like say if you got like an office chair, try sleeping in an office chair and tell me how it feels the next day for sleeping for 8 hours in an office chair. Tell me that
That's if
at
you
what
log
age.
out in your ship.
Yeah.
You're making my back hurt
in a
more
cave.
right now. Stop.
Which turns Star Citizen into the 30+ experience where like you just wake up and your arm has a tier 3 injury. Somehow you have no idea how it happened. It just occurred.
Just yawned wrong the night before. It's like threw your back out.
But that's a really good example of things that they are waiting to update until post server meshing, because they're like, okay, this will be the new bar that we need to update things to work with. And so they've been waiting to update certain things. Some things have already been updated because they didn't need server meshing. They need a PES or whatever you. But things like bed logging, that's going to be part of it. And so we are removing another barrier to the development of the game to allow us to get to the intended experience.
Yeah. Okay. I was the other thing I was going to really kind of hone in on was that like these are things they want to do. But the other thing that's important to note is that a lot of the reasons why this is happening is for gameplay. And this is going to sound weird for a lot of people who don't follow this closely, but one of the reasons why the infamous T-posing on chairs for NPCs happens is because the server performance is awful. And the reason why the server performance is awful is because CIG is trying to stick entities in insane high amounts onto one server, which isn't designed to handle that many entities. And everything they've done has been trying to move memory off of the DGS so that the DGS doesn't have to deal with that. But as you do that, it improves performance. So you go, okay, so we can add more players per server. Then it makes it worse because now more players are scattered around the verse, meaning more entities have to be spawned. If you've ever done something like Xenothreat and seen like the massive dump that Xenothreat will take in an area where you're playing, it's because the game server is trying to tell everyone in that region, say you have 50 people doing Xenothreat, 50 people in that region all have to render that exact same ship, and that ship has to be rendered in all different angles from where it's being seen, so that information has to be stored by the DGS for all of those players to see. And so you'll often see those spikes and drops in terms of performance. And because of those kinds of issues, removing as much information off the DGS as possible is step one. But also doing things like server meshing allows for more, basically to compartmentalize the systems into their own servers. So you take what could handle 20,000 entities, let's just say that as an example, and now you give it the space that only has 5,000. You're going to get a performance boost. So
Yellow Dart Bubs inadvertently makes a point, though. This allows for if a server's performance is degrading, and maybe they're generating a certain number of errors, however they sort of track the, an error or an error count or whatever. When you have the Stanton system being simulated by 4 or 8 or 10 servers, and one of them, one of the dedicated game servers is reaching a point in its life cycle where, hey, it's getting a little bit tired. It needs to take a nap. Okay, we can use the replication layer to update a new server, hand over transition authority from that server to the others, while another one spins up with that information and then update it simultaneously. Because that's the thing is right now, it's just like if you have crash recovery right now, they could do crash recovery for the one server in the system, and it's essentially that process, and everything continues on, and you don't you never have this point where it gets up to the top and then the whole thing fails and it affects everybody. No, it just affects this small little window of the play space and the people in it for a short period.
It was glorious. I don't know. Did any of you play the preview, the tech preview on the last tech preview on this one?
For
server meshing?
For server meshing? Yeah, I got to try it for not as long as I'd like, because I tried for a little bit and it wasn't going great, and then they put it back up, and yeah after that it did.
I think I was in there for a few minutes.
So I was able to do the one app, like, because they did it and then something messed up. So the next day they relaunched it with the fixes.
Yeah, it was a day later.
And I was able to get into both. And the one that would happen the day later, it was very interesting because there were people in the chat who were also playing in that same server I was in, or the same shard that I was in. And they'd come in and be like, X shard is down. Like, or X server's down. I'm on this and this server's down. And I was like in deep space away from that shard and I was still playing. So it meant that my gameplay wasn't interrupted. Only the people's who were in that shard or in that server that was were affected by that down. But if I went into that shard, that server, I would immediately get hit with the please wait rebooting sort of thing. So for like a third of the server, yeah, it sucked, but for everybody else, it was fine. So you had pretty decent high like performance, like 30 hertz sort of servers. So like the AI was responsive. They were, the gameplay was smooth. My performance as a game never dropped below 40 FPS. It was 60 or higher everywhere, and it was super good. Like, it played fine.
Yeah. My server FPS was consistently high. It just did fluctuate a lot. Like, you rarely see it at 30, but it was going from 12 to 30 in these rapid mood swings, but it was still double digits the entire time.
Yeah.
So that was
what a dream.
Yeah, the lowest it dipped was like 20. And it was like it would dip down, and that was because literally everyone was logging into the game, and so everyone was logging into the planets, and it seemed like all the planets were on the same server. So it was like 200 people were logging into one server, and still it was like 20 FPS server FPS. Even like I was in ArcCorp, I still had 40 FPS in ArcCorp, like my game FPS, which was like
I was specifically talking about the server FPS.
Yeah,
like, the R_display info. Not, I'm not running on a potato, but
yeah. But so yeah, it's getting better, and I would suggest anyone look up any footage from that to kind of get an idea of how that functioned, and
that's still pre-release of the tech.
Yes, that was just a configuration test. They were just configuring it differently, and what
not
areas
even
was
in
covered.
Evo.
Yeah.
That's why like the server meshing, like I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine a lot of people didn't really hear the devs what they said when they did the server meshing video. When they kept saying it worked shockingly well, they were expecting it to explode. No developer ever says that.
Yeah. They don't want to be admitted.
They have as much PTSD from 318 as we do.
Yeah.
It was,
like,
it
even
was
in
pretty
other
funny
games.
how frank they were about it too. It's just like, it didn't break. It's weird.
Yeah, like most of the time, especially with server tech, when devs are implementing things, they expect it to go about as good as No Man's Skies. Like it's like that's generally, especially with server tech, how it goes. Is
You're
hey, I
talking
think
about
this will
launch. You mean No Man's Sky's launch, not current No Man's Sky, because No Man's Sky's
right.
Great. It's great.
Dude, I need to find time to jump into that again. Yeah. I don't know what they changed because like that's a half-an-hour video to figure that out. It's the graphics alone. This looks so good.
So let's go into this last little bit before we get into the question and answers, because I think we've kind of covered a lot of like what server meshing is and why it's important. I'm going to hit us with the future problem. I kind of already asked this, but I'm going to hit it to you more specifically there, SpaceTomato. Can CIG achieve their goals of full dynamic? I'll also explain this a little bit so people understand, because we've kind of hit on this a little bit. There's a confusion that people have. What CIG is going to do with 4.0 is static 1. They call it static 1, which basically means static server meshing, which means that the Stanton system would be carved up into a certain number of zones, and each of those zones is handled by a different server. And then Pyro will be carved up into different zones, and each zone is being handled by a different server. All of those servers are meshed together, so you can transition between them with
connected to one replication layer, one set of services,
Yeah.
And that is a shard.
And that is a
It is
shard.
a static shard. So whenever it boots, whenever that reaches its population limit, then they will boot up an entire new shard in that exact same configuration.
Yeah.
They'll just copy another one because that is what most games that utilize some form of server meshing will do.
Yeah.
It's a static configuration.
No matter even if nobody's in that area, they're going to load that area of that map just because they are with that server, because they have to anticipate somebody coming in, which is one of the reasons why MMOs are expensive to run, because like I don't even want to know the costs of running a server that's capable of running Star Citizen for the hourly cost, let alone the daily cost of running those sorts of things. It is probably more money than I have ever made in my life. If you want to run something like that over the course of a year, because those services are very expensive. It's one of the reasons why most MMOs fail, because they just legitimately can't make enough money to offset the cost of running them, let alone profits. So with that, after that, they want to do what's called dynamic one, and dynamic one is basically static one. But if those servers that, like, say, server 1 in Stanton, there is nobody in server 1 in Stanton on shard 12, well, then shard 12 will just turn off server 1. So server 1 doesn't exist anymore. But if someone gets close to server 1, shard will go, oh, there's somebody in the proximity of server 1. Let's boot it back up. And then they'll just reboot server 1 so that people can go over
Not so much turn it off, but they will hand off everything that server is controlling to essentially the adjacent server. So if it's, if it was 2 servers for Stanton, then it would just become 1. They would merge and become 1 server. Not like it doesn't. Server 2 is only handling everything on this side of Stanton or wherever, and then this is just a void. It just means that server 2 is now handling everything, and so it expands and contracts.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
So
it doesn't expand beyond what the borders are from static, though. Yeah. From my understanding. So
what they said is they could, with that configuration, they could allow it for more zones, because with dynamic. You can dynamic isn't just the servers, it's also the replication layer. And so they could, in theory, go from, okay, we have 1 replication layer for all of Stanton and Pyro, and now we're going to say, okay, we can spin up more replicants to a certain point, but maybe now we'll have 4 replicants for Stanton or something like that. And now, but the hard limit for all those simultaneous connections is essentially 12 servers for Stanton instead of 4, and 1 for each landing zone, that et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's
but
more
then it can also contract
2, though,
down.
right?
Dynamic 2 is where the borders are. They can be redrawn at any time, just based on density of load.
So static 1 is effectively, if it's a zone, it can be its own server.
Yeah, if it's just the zones are still a fixed, fixed thing, and a fixed entity zone.
For anybody who doesn't know, your ship is a zone. Like, the interior of your ship is a zone. The area around a landing zone is a zone. The actual landing zone itself is a zone.
If you ever hear anyone talking about object containers and object container streaming, each object container is a zone. It's just different terminology for the same thing.
Yeah, they're object containers. So anything that's an object container can be its own server, is what Dynamic 1 means.
I think Dynamic 1 is well within reach. I think Dynamic 2 is near, for me, it's almost near parity with the single shard idea.
I think it was Benoit.
It's almost is the juice worth the squeeze kind of thing. If we've already got Dynamic 1, how much do we really need?
Yeah, then you start to bump up against how many shards will there be? Like how geographically speaking?
Yeah.
How many different worlds of Star Citizen will there be?
Yeah, I think it was Benoit that was saying that they really don't want to do static server meshing as far as the server engineers.
Yeah.
They would like to just skip it, spend the extra 3 to 12 months, and just skip straight to dynamic.
It's just cheap.
That's how close we are to dynamic.
it's finding those points where they need to scale. But the
Yeah.
big thing about dynamic one that's important to me is it further expands what server meshing does. Higher player counts, more better
Entities.
performance, resilience, more entities. This is what allows for greater density of POI and gameplay in an area. But the other thing is, and I'm just gonna drop this bomb right here, but I think dynamic one is really what's holding back Quantum/Star Sim. It's that's the biggest tech hurdle, and Star Sim Quantum has to be able to hook into everything as it's changing hands in terms of authority. And until we've got that nailed down, all these things changing hands with authority, and then some service keeping track of that in order to essentially tell Star Sim, hey, here's the updated email address or phone number for this thing that you're trying to maintain contact with as it's being handed off. They won't integrate it.
So you're talking about the dynamic
parity,
economy,
we're trying to
right? Because I do want to simplify it for some people who have no idea what Star Sim or Quantum is. You're talking about the dynamic economy,
yeah, because they wouldn't be able to maintain that parity. It's just like with 4.0. If they tried to make 4.0 dynamic version 1, we would be moving forward in one point, but our gameplay experience and things, it wouldn't be the same. They wouldn't have to be able to maintain that parity. And so if they already had Star Sim / Quantum, whatever they're calling it now, hooked up, the process of being able to get it working in order to maintain the parity with the gameplay experience that we have now would be astronomical. And so that's part of the reason that Benoit wrote it the way he did, is like, if we're waiting for these things to get in before we start hooking all this stuff up to it. Because if we hook it up to it and then we change everything, then it's going to break.
Yeah.
And that you're talking about your testing and development, going from 4.1 to 4.2 or something like that. That would be like the 3.0 doldrums.
Yeah.
Where they're just taking forever to try and figure these problems out. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one wants that. They don't want that. That's even worse than 3.18. They iterated on 3.18 like that.
Yeah.
But
it took them 3 months to get to get through 3.18, because like 3.19 was just 3.18 X patch. 3.20 was like August when it came out, and then once
they did a lot of iteration in a short period of time, but they wouldn't be able to do that in between these two if they had to fix this on top of move on to dynamic.
But that's really my question, because now that we can understand the difference between static and dynamic, like with dynamic 2 being able to just get even smaller in terms of the detail. So not just is it an object container streaming, but like a quarter of this object container can be its own server, to basically just like squeeze out every little bit of detail you can get, so that the servers, you could in theory have thousands of servers for hundreds of thousands of players, because every step you take is going into a different server seamlessly, which is, in my opinion, insane. The question is, how far do you think CIG will be able to push it? Do you think they'll be able to push it to that insane detail, or do you think they're going to find, static is going to be the wall they hit and they just can't do dynamic? Do you think they'll hit dynamic 1? Do you think they'll go even beyond this sort of like insane detail granularity of servers? That's why I was going to ask SpaceTomato, because you've kind of answered that a little bit, but how far do you think they're going to actually be able to go with this technology?
That was a long lead up to the question.
Well, it required a lot of context, because we didn't specifically talk about like how the breakdown was going to be, because
that all helps, because I don't have to say that stuff now. Yeah. I think it comes back to being a question of money. Like, people talk a lot about how this company is doing everything it can to make money and stuff, and I think there's a whole nother conversation there about how much you bite off and how much you can support when you bite that off. They've bitten off a lot. But it comes back to money. How successful can Squadron 42 be to give this a solid boost in development? How successful can they be in monetizing this game without depending on ship sales? And how good does the game, are they able to improve the game after they get static server meshing working? And from the sounds of it, it sounds like they don't want to spend much time there. So it's a long-term kind of problem. Like this could be something that maybe they figure out dynamic server meshing within the next year and a half, but we might not be looking at the actual full scale of what they could do with it for 5-6 more years if that's what it takes to push the game. They could, call it short before that. But I do think that they can get this very granular. I mean, Stanton is a very unique system in what it provides for the game and how much really is supposed to be going on in Stanton when it comes to the dynamic economy. Stanton might be like one of the most active systems in the entire game. And I could see them pumping servers into that system to get it to work the way they want it to, with how important these planets are, how much trade is going between this system and Terra, or this system out through Magnus. Does it connect to Magnus?
Magnus, yeah.
Yeah.
Magnus,
So
Pyro, and Terra.
and that's an important route to go from Stanton to Magnus, and then obviously Terra is important. So there's just a lot of implications, and I guess this is why they started with Stanton. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much more I could put towards the fact that I think that they could push this really far, but it ends up just coming back to how can they fund it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, money.
I honestly think
Goodness.
that it will. They'll actually put a hard limit on how small the servers will try and make themselves. Like, I don't think a server will voluntarily make itself, except in some extreme cases, like smaller than a javelin or smaller than a single skyscraper, with like building interiors and stuff. Like, there's so few examples of when you're going to need more server power to, like, say, do a floor of building or a single room of a ship or a building. Like, the client will be overwhelmed before the server will in that case.
Okay.
So I don't think it will. They will have to put a hard floor on it on how small it can be.
Tree, do you think they can? Do you think they can? I think the question is morphs into: do you think they can technically do it, and do you think they will do it?
I think the gap between Dynamic 1 and Dynamic 2 will be far larger than the gap between static and dynamic. And I don't think we're going to notice as much of a difference. I think everybody needs to remember that this is as much as we're interested in the performance aspects of this and what it allows for in terms of gameplay and granularity. This is also for CIG to be able to save money, to allow for the number of shards and the number of servers and services and all the processing power, because all these things, a lot of this just run virtually on these giant mega machines owned by Amazon. But for all that to scale down when North America goes to sleep and Asia wakes up, and so it's not all statically up and running and costing CIG a crap ton of money 24/7. And so it's meant to be able to save them money. It's just going to cost them a good amount of money in the first place. It's initially a short-term investment to allow them to get to this more efficient model. But I think we're definitely going to see an order of magnitude more granularity than we have right now when it comes to, if you just sort of imagine what is within Stanton. Because they've talked about this with the other tools, and SpaceTomato has covered the tools ad nauseum, and it's really fascinating stuff because they are building these tools because they have an expectation to be able to fill up a star system with a lot of points of interest and a lot of content based off of their goals with server meshing.
I don't know if it's been specifically said, so I definitely wanted to make sure it was that, like, just because one server zone is small doesn't mean all server zones are small. So if one server, let's say, does that one skyscraper in ArcCorp size, maybe that's like a hub. There's like an organization having their monthly meeting or something, and there's like 1,000 players in that one building, plus NPCs, plus environment work. Maybe that, like, all of space only has like 20 people in it, so you can have a all of space server and an ArcCorp server and this skyscraper server. It does so they can be different sizes for different areas. So especially, like they've been saying, like Tomato started saying, like, the density of gameplay in Stanton is something that is unique to Stanton. Like, the biggest thing about like Terra is Terra. There's not much going on other than Terra in Terra, and like stuff like not Hadrian, but the Hades system, like it's a dead system. There's not much there. It's just kind of like barren rocks. There'll be the eventual like passer through or cargo run or a person trying to like look up Hadesian artifacts, but like there's not going to be a lot of stuff in there, especially compared to Stanton. So that there just won't be probably servers running there most of the time, and then it'll probably just be the whole system on a single server. And then on top of that, servers and how they split them up on the actual hardware. So a server isn't a physical server, so they can split up servers on the same rack of servers.
Yeah.
And for better definitions on that, go watch videos that can explain way better than I can.
All right. I think it's a good way of putting it. I will also say that I think CIG CIG has the technology. Once they got static working, everything else is done. They can do all of it. But is it worth the investment? Is it worth the time? Can they get what the levels are? Because there's going to be a point where, yeah, it's really impressive to say you could get, I don't know, 10,000 people in the same area fighting at one another. That's a great headline. But is it worth it?
Virtual machine.
How often are you going to even have those situations where 10,000 people are going to be fighting each other? Like
there's also again, how many shards will there be?
Yeah.
How many regions in the world will there be that they have to replicate this? If there was one single shard, then the amount of modularity they could build into how these servers work would be crazy. But if we need, 8 different versions of the game for different regions, or 20 different versions, however many they need to for that latency to keep up, then it's like, well, you have to multiply that many servers by that many different instances
and
they've created.
I haven't had a lot of time to go through the Shenzhen Bar Citizen Q&A, but there was a kind of a sobering question. I forget where the servers are hosted in China, but there's only like one. And even in the Shenzhen area, they were saying they were getting 100 plus ping. I think it was Hong Kong, to the Hong Kong servers. And Chris was like, that's weird. Maybe we need more servers here. And like, it would be nice to find a way to go faster than light, but currently,
yeah,
just host the servers in Australia. Everyone gets bad connection. There we go.
I mean, the answer, the crazy
subs isn't what keeps Warcraft going.
Yeah,
MMOs survive off of microtransactions. It's not subs.
Yeah, well, because I'm releasing this. Because I'm releasing this as a separate video now as well, so that people can watch the video. This is a plug for me to say you should go watch the Q&A, because that's one of the things we'll bring up about subs, how to fund this problem, because that does lead to the problem of how do you get funding to keep Star Citizen up if it's going to be so expensive to run this, and the question that a lot of people are pushing, who are saying we need to do a sub model rather than a pay to play or a free to play model. And we'll have that discussion. So make sure if you're watching this after the fact, check the VOD, which I'll link in the top right, or it'll be available for you to watch the full thing, the full VOD. This is just going to be the discussion section.
And current subs aren't funding like the game. That stuff's going to like CitizenCon development and video production.
Save it. Save it.
Okay.
Save it.
Just make sure that's the question specifically.
You got to push them towards the Q&A. Shut up.
Yes, so I can watch further. So I can double dip, baby. But I was going to say, what it comes down to.
Paid mounts. Pretty sure that's the entire game, though.
What was I going to say? Oh, the other thing is like I'm pretty sure that they'll do one shard per region. So like North America, Australia, Asia, EU, and I think that's it for now.
That would be amazing.
I think that's the end goal. Like I don't know if it's going to be, because the other thing is that to remember, and I think Tree kind of hit on this, is that the more they can condense people into a larger shard, the less servers they have to pay for. Mm-hmm. So the bigger the shard, the smaller the number of servers, because if you have to pay for 100 NA servers, each with their own shards in them, or each with their own 100 NA shards, each with their own servers in them, you have to pay for the same amount of servers in every shard. But if you can do it in one shard, that reduces your cost by 99 or whatever. I don't know the math, but it reduces the cost a lot in terms of how much you can do. Even if you had to increase the number of servers that would be in that one shard, it would never be the same number as 100 North American shards would be. So that's a cost cutting measure, as well as also increasing player size and keeping the fidelity of the game, which is also, the important part.
I don't know how you guys have played the game, obviously, but I've played on Australian servers, being in East Coast North America, or East Coast US North America. It's not that bad.
Yeah. I average between 120 to 200 ping to Australia. And I live in Idaho.
100 for this game is not that bad.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it's not Battlefront.
The US is on the East Coast.
Battlefield. It's not like Battlefield levels of ping where you have to have lightning fast reactions, and it's more of a slower game than most things that need high or low ping.
Tell that to my spiking mining laser, man.
Yeah, the random spikes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, with this, I think we've covered. If somebody came in here not knowing at all any of these things or having a bunch of misconceptions, I think we did a pretty good job. But if you want a better concept, there is a fantastic video by this tomato. This space tomato over here. It's called, what is it called again? Is it just called the server meshing?
Server meshing explained, the one from March.
Yeah, from March-ish.
Yeah. It's like server meshing explained something else, a little clickbaity.
I'll link it in the description for people who need to see it. And Tree, I know you and Naz have done one on the Pathfinders podcast. Is it just like a Pathfinders podcast on server meshing?
Yeah, it was like 2 years
older,
ago, though.
But
Yeah, and that was everything was based off of current evidence. So there's been more since then, but
okay,
it was pre-test channel.
Pre-test channel, before those stuff. So you can check those out as well to kind of get the history of how these things have evolved, especially if people are interested in where it came from. And if you enjoyed this and you're watching this after the fact, hi, thank you for watching. Make sure you come join us live Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Twitch.tv/TheAstroPub, YouTube.com/TheAstroPubLive, where we do the Captain's Table. It's not every Saturday, but we do most Saturdays. Sometimes we'll take a break because I've got vacation or I can't get anybody, or CIG's doing a big release, so I don't want to try to compete with CIG's own releases. And make sure you come back and watch the live Q&A, where people are going to ask questions from the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them, including that subscription question. And to watch that, but that's a separate one. I wanted to make it so that this was more manageable. It's still going to be like an hour and 15 minutes, but that's a little more manageable than the 2 hours and plus this is going to be. So make sure you, of course, as always, like the video if you enjoyed this. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see this for more, and the bell icon to know when these release and when I go live. Thank you for watching. Thank you to SpaceTomato, Tree0311, and Nazeris, aka the Nova Forge. Make sure you check out their channels, which are all linked as well in the description. And I will see you all, or do the right one. Thank you for watching. And like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.